GCH Guitar Academy, Fingerstyle Guitar Course, Lesson 25, Walking Bass Lines. If you've been following this course, you might recall Lesson 5, where we looked at alternating bass lines. And if you don't, I'll put the link down below in the description to that particular lesson, as well as the playlist for the entire course. And the reason I mentioned about Lesson 5 is because walking bass lines are quite similar to alternating bass lines, except quite often you add or remove notes from the chord to create a walking bass line. And typically you use walking bass lines to join chords together. However, sometimes you can use a run of chords to actually produce a walking bass line. Hopefully, by going through this lesson, you'll have some awareness of walking bass lines, and you'll be able to hear them in other people's music. But not only that, you'll be able to use them in your own music, or where you're making up your own finger-picking patterns. Right, let's do some simple exercises and a tune to give you a better understanding of what a walking bass line is. It'd be good if you've got a guitar at hand, because it'd be really beneficial if you could play along with the exercises. Exercise 1. This hopefully is a very easy exercise, and it just includes two chords that you should be familiar with, and they are the G major and the E minor. And you'll notice that the finger-picking pattern for the chords are primary, index, middle, annular, middle, index, which you've done loads of times. However, between the chords, you'll notice three bass notes that are all played with the primary finger. And hopefully you'll notice as well that the bass notes overlap with the chords. So, taking a look at the first three notes, you'll notice we start on an open E string, then the second fret on the E string, and then the third fret on the E string, which is not only part of that bass run, but that third fret on the E string is also the first note of the finger-picking pattern for the G. And then at the beginning of the second bar, we play that third fret on the bottom E string from the G, the second fret on the bottom E string, which leads us through to the open string on the bottom E string, which is the leading note for the E minor. So in the case of exercise 1, the moving bass line is being used to join the chords together. You'll also notice that the entire exercise is in repeats, and that means you repeat the whole line. And how many times you repeat it really depends on how long it takes you to get it right. When playing the chords, you don't need to put all the fingers in place, because you're not actually playing the A string or the D string. So for example, when you play the G major chord, you don't need to play the second fret on the A string. And you can finger the G either with the second and the third finger, or the third and the fourth finger, whichever you prefer. When you play the E minor, you don't have to put any fingers on the guitar at all, because you're finger picking all open strings. Before I play through exercise 1, here's a few bars of the drum beat, because it's quite different to metronome beats we've used in the past. And the reason for that is the bass drum is exaggerating the bass line to make it easier for you to follow. I've put these beats at the end of this video at 120 beats per minute, 130 beats per minute, and 140 beats per minute. Here's exercise 1 being played through with the beats at 120 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction, and I'm repeating the exercise 3 times. And here that is again, at the same speed, repeated 3 times. So you can try and play along with it if you want to. Don't worry if you can't play exercise 1 with the beats yet. Just try playing it without the beats and build up the speed and fluidity. And then when you think you're ready, you can try playing along with the beats that are at the end of this video. Here it is being played again one last time at 120 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction, and I'll repeat it 3 times. Exercise 2. This exercise is obviously a lot longer than the first exercise, but it's fairly easy. However, there aren't many opportunities to cheat in the chords on this particular exercise, so it's worth fingering the entire chords. The chords are fairly easy, so hopefully you know them all. And the chords are C major, A minor, D minor and G7th. And this is actually quite a common chord progression, so I'm sure you'll come across it in the future. With this particular exercise, you could break down each line into 3 components. The first bar is a complete fingerpicking pattern. Then the first part of the second bar is a partial repeat of that fingerpicking pattern. And the last 2 notes are the moving bass lines. And you'll notice with the moving bass lines that the first line you have to dismantle the chord in order to play the moving bass line. Whereas in the second line, the third line and the fourth line, you can actually play the moving bass line keeping the chord in place. However, just like the first exercise, the moving bass lines overlap with the chords. So for example, going from the first line to the second line, we'd play the 3rd fret on the A string, the 2nd fret on the A string, and then go straight to the open A string to introduce the A minor. And this is how it happens with all these changes. So you're looking for a fluid transition between the bass lines and the actual chords. As with the previous exercise, this one's got repeats in it, and that's because the moving bass line at the end joins back on to the beginning. I'll demonstrate the exercise being played through twice at 130 beats per minute. Try and play along if you think you can, otherwise just listen to it to get an idea how it should sound. When you're practicing these exercises, you don't have to use a metronome. But if you want to play along with me, it obviously makes it a lot easier. However, if you want to practice with the metronome, I'll put these beats at the end of the video at 120, 130 and 140 beats per minute. Here's exercise 2 being played again with a repeat at 130 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. Try and play along with it if you think you can. And here that is again one last time before we move on to the next exercise. Exercise 3. This exercise is longer than the previous 2 exercises. However, it includes a number of different ways the walking bass line is included in the exercise. But the first thing you should notice is that the first 2 lines are repeated. So when you play this tune, you play the first 2 lines twice before you move on to the 3rd line. And something you need to watch out for whilst you're learning this exercise is the fact that in some places you have to remove notes from the chord in order to play the walking bass line, whereas in others you don't have to. And the final thing to watch out for is there's 3 places where you have to change the finger picking pattern completely in order to play the bass line. To give you an idea what it eventually should sound like, here it is being played through at 140 beats per minute. We'll just go through it line by line so you can see how to play it. With the first line, you don't need to play the complete G, just the bottom E string and the A string. So you can play it almost like a C shape, which will make it easier when you go on to the next line. But before we look at the next line, look at the second half of the first bar. You'll notice you have to lift the second finger off the half G shape, and then in the second bar you have to put it back in place. In the second line, you have to do exactly the same thing but with a C chord, in that halfway through the first bar you remove the second finger but then put it back. Or if you prefer, you just play a partial C to start with and then put the complete C on for the second bar. At the end of the second line, you hit the repeat, so you repeat the first two lines. For the third line, you play a D through 3/4 of the line. However, the last 4 notes you break away and play single notes. But remember, these single notes lead through to the fourth line, which is back to a C chord. And the fourth line is easy to explain because it's a C throughout. You just have to watch the finger picking. The fifth line is exactly the same as the third line, so you just have to play it the same way, even to the fact that it leads through to a C on the sixth line. And the sixth line is the same as the second line, and the seventh line is the same as the first line, and then you finish the tune. So you can see this exercise isn't too hard. It's quite easy actually, but it's good exercise for your thumb and using walking bass lines. Here's the whole of exercise 3 being played at 140 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. If you want to, or if you think you're ready, you can try playing along with it. Otherwise, don't worry, you can practice it and come back to this video in the future if you want to. And here that is again, one last time. Only You by Vince Clarke. This tune probably seems like a strange choice to learn on guitar, because it was originally written for synthesizers when Vince Clarke was in the band Yazoo. However, I've chosen this tune because it is a really good example of a walking bass line, and he's used the bass notes of the chords to create that walking bass line. Here I've circled the notes that formed the walking bass line so they're easier to see. And here's the walking bass line from the verse being played on a bass guitar. Now, if you take a look at the first line of the verse, you'll see that the chords are pretty straightforward. And there's only one chord that's been altered to take into account the walking bass line. And that's an A minor 7th, but with a G bass. However, that's pretty easy to play. The complications come on the second line, where we have an F. Now, I'm aware there's many people following this course who don't like or haven't done bar chords, which is why I did a lesson on bar chords a couple of weeks ago. I've put a link to that video down below in the description just in case you missed it, and also another lesson I did just on how to play the F, because so many people have problems with it. Here you can see 4 ways of playing the F. The first is to play the complete bar chord. And the second is not to bother fingering the 2 notes that you don't actually play in this song. The third way would be to play an open F, but then bring the thumb round to play the 1st fret on the bottom E string. And really, if you use this method, you don't really need to put your 3rd finger down, as you won't be playing this when you play the chord. Here's what it looks like when it's being played. The fourth and final way to play the F would be just to use a standard open F. However, if you use this method, you'd have to play a different bass line, because you'd have to play the 3rd fret on the D string, and this would make the bass line sound a bit different. Here's what that looks like and sounds like. If you're not sure which method of F you'd like to play, pause the video at this point and try all 4 to see which one you get on best with. And if you can already play an F but it's not perfect, keep using that method, because it'll only get better if you practice it. The examples I've played so far have been at full speed, which is about 200 beats per minute. But here's the verse being played with a 2-bar introduction, including the repeats, at 160 beats per minute, and then you can try and play along with it if you want. I'll be using the thumb method to play the F, as more people are unfamiliar with that one. Here's the verse again with repeats at 160 beats per minute. And as usual, there's a 2-bar introduction so you can play along with it if you think you're ready. Right, let's take a look at the chorus. And the main lines you might have trouble with will be lines 1 and 3. And that's because we've already done line 2, as it's identical to line 1 in the verse. Now, how hard you find lines 1 and 3 really depend on where you are with playing that F chord. And if you're happy playing the F bar chord, you might find it easier to play the G as a bar chord also, which is exactly the same as the F, but in the 3rd fret. And this is because you literally just slide the shape up by 2 frets. If you're not using bar chords, if you're using the open chords, you'll need to practice changing between the F and the G, because it's a fairly difficult change. However, once you feel fairly proficient with that chord change, you can play the whole chorus through a few times to get used to playing it. Here it is being played more slowly at 160 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, so you can play along with it if you think you're ready. Once you've got the verse and the chorus, you can bring them together. And looking at the arrangement, you play verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. So the arrangement is just going straight through the verse and the chorus and repeating that. Here it is being played once with a 2-bar introduction at 140 beats per minute. And here that is again at full speed, 200 beats per minute, with a 2-bar introduction. So you can build up and practice this tune, I've included the metronome beats at the end of this video at 160 beats per minute, 180 beats per minute and 200 beats per minute. Here's the verse and chorus being played through one last time at 200 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction, so you can play along with it if you want to. As I'm going to put various metronome beats at the end of this video, I'll sign out now. If you've just discovered this course or this channel, I've put the link to the complete course down below in the description, and that's a YouTube playlist, so it's completely free. And if you want to view the eBooks of the tab to go along with this course, you can see it at www.ebooksforguitar.com. And if you've already got a copy of the Fingerstyle guitar course in PDF format, it might be worth you re-downloading it, as I've done a number of changes. If you've enjoyed this video and you haven't already, please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon, because it really does help us and it's much appreciated. And you'll be notified when I upload new videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you'll be back soon for more guitar lessons.